Everyone hates League of Legends. That may sound like hyperbole, and it probably is, but ask any League player about their experiences with the game, and they will tell you endless tales of intentional feeders, rage quitters, or how horrible their useless jungler is. Something about this game in particular gets under your skin in a way that almost no other experience can. The game is still fun, mind you. I mean, don't get me wrong, there has to be something enjoyable about playing it for this to become the massive hit it is today, but we all have our fair share of stories about the multitude of times this game has made our blood boil.
Enjoy, you disgusting permaban Olaf, everyone.
There is one group of players, though, who we expect to guide us through our rage-induced strokes, and that is the pro community. Professional players are kind of put on a pedestal above us regular plebs. They're the face of the competitive scene and the face of the game, so whether it's fair or not, they are held to a higher standard than the average person. Anytime we see a big-name pro player just even say something passive-aggressive to one of his teammates, the community will instantly jump on him and hound him as if he's committed a terrible sin, as if we haven't all done the exact same thing in solo queue ourselves. But that's only because we expect them to be the ones herding us through our 4 versus 5s. They have to be the ones to set a good example, because if they aren't able to, then maybe nobody can. Well, today I want to share with you one of my personal favorite stories of when 2 of League's biggest pro players couldn't help but succumb to the frustrations of the game. This was a moment that happened on a live stream in front of everybody. The whole community, it felt like, was watching. It's a moment in time that's such a contrast to the professionalism we see nowadays. I would say it's a work of art. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of HotshotGG.
I dropped it. I dropped it. I dropped it. Exactly. I dropped it. I dropped it. I dropped it. No, I didn't. I dropped it.
In the early years of League of Legends, no team was bigger or better than the organization of Counter Logic Gaming. Otherwise known as CLG, this was a team who dominated the North American and international tournament scene for the first few months of its existence. The team was formed through the 5 most talented individual players on the NA server coming together to enter these events, and it turned out their raw skill was so far beyond their competitors, they could almost always win everything in spite of having hardly played together before. This caused them to develop a very interesting strategy where for a long time they would choose to not practice against any other teams because in their eyes they had nothing to gain. If they were already the best team in the world, practicing against other opponents would only give the opportunity for those other opponents to improve, whereas CLG wouldn't get anything out of it. After all, they were already the best in the world. Surprisingly enough, this strategy worked for a decent amount of time, but eventually, in spite of their best efforts, other teams and other regions did end up improving and started beating CLG. Now, something we should probably mention here that's kind of funny about this early period of League, a lot of the time pro teams live streamed their practices as well as their tournament matches as a way to give their fans something to watch.
Did you just get red?
So bad.
Or no, she just cleared red.
At the time, League of Legends didn't have an official spectator mode, and as a result, a lot of events had no official coverage of the matches being played. This meant the only way for viewers to see what was happening in these games was if one of these teams decided to live stream it, which surprisingly a lot of teams chose to do. This was actually a really cool thing for fans since we all got to see how the inner mechanisms of a professional League of Legends team really worked. But of course, it did have its downsides. Most obviously, if you're live streaming your scrimmages, other teams are able to listen in on your strategies. They will hear all the calls you're making, what it is you're trying to do, and use that knowledge in their next match against you. Most players, though, didn't think this was too big of a problem since most of the calls that are made in the middle of a game don't have too much secrecy to them. It's just players talking about, oh, go ward over here, or let's engage them over there. As long as they delayed their stream a little bit so their opponents couldn't hear it in real time, nobody from the outside world would really gain a meaningful advantage. However, This habit of live streaming practice matches did have another big issue. If you're showing your voice comms and whatnot during a game, other teams can listen in on how players interact with each other. Specifically, the entire world can hear if two teammates argue over something. Whatever friction exists within the relationships between players, that is something that will be broadcast to everyone listening. Enter our two heroes. In Season 1 of League of Legends, there was no celebrity bigger than George Elidis, otherwise known as HotshotGG. Hotshot was the founder and owner of CLG, a Canadian League player who had previously spent time playing Guild Wars, Dota, and Heroes of Newerth at the competitive level. When he first picked up League, it took a little bit of getting used to, but eventually Hotshot would become the undisputed best top laner in the world. He learned how to master a few champions in particular to a point where you would have to ban them if you wanted any chance of beating CLG.
We should have definitely banned the Hotshot Nidali GG. Basically, it kicked my brother in the ass.
Eventually, all this success led to Hotshot becoming the biggest celebrity pro and streamer in League's early era. He was able to pull multiple thousands of viewers on his live stream in an age where streamers were considered huge if they even broke 100 views. Before long, he was known by almost everybody who ever even attempted playing League of Legends. This popularity led to Hotshot quickly becoming a notable member of the community that a lot of people looked up to. More recent League players may know Hotshot from his calm and collected personality, as he's a pretty fun and silly guy nowadays, doing stuff like dyeing his hair pink when CLG loses to their rivals TSM. But back in these early days, Hotshot was just as vulnerable as anyone to the frustrations of solo queue.
He's in that brush. Raiden is in that fucking brush, and he's gonna ulti. He's gonna fucking ulti right now. Where's Raiden? Where's Raiden? I'm waiting for him. I'm waiting for him.
League of Legends, of course, is a 5 vs 5 team-oriented game, and one where you need your team to be on the same page if you're gonna try and win a match. This can be particularly frustrating in the game's main mode of play, solo queue, which will pit 5 strangers together on a team and forces them to work together to win. This is a mind-numbing experience if you're a pro player who's really knowledgeable and knows what everyone should be doing, but who your teammates might simply choose to not listen to you. Even today, you see pro players and big-name streamers getting frustrated at the game for reasons like this, as it's almost impossible to always keep your cool when your teammates disagree with you, and those disagreements seemingly always turn into losses. But in these early days of League, this wasn't really as big of a deal as the community may view it today. We all kind of understood, everyone got frustrated and raged. Every pro player who entered tournaments did it alongside every viewer who watched them. It was oddly kind of a wholesome thing that we all sort of shared. This meant Hotshot and the other big celebrity streamers who occasionally raged while playing League weren't really disliked for it, at least not by the majority of viewers. Most people thought it was funny a pro could lose their cool just like they might, and Hotshot in particular saw his stream grow to incredible heights alongside CLG's success in these early years. However, as we mentioned earlier, CLG's success didn't last forever. Eventually, they'd place pretty poorly at a few different events, and a few of their players would leave the roster. Notably, the team's jungler, Kobe24, would leave at some point in Season 1, as he didn't see a future for himself in competitive gaming, so he would return to real life, going to pursue an education and career in engineering. Ironically enough, that's the same Kobe who is now one of the biggest and best color commentators in League of Legends, currently casting the LCS. When Kobe left CLG, the team had to bring in a new jungler and eventually decided on a very interesting character to replace him, Brandon DeMarco, who went by the in-game name Saintvicious. Saint had previously been trying out on CLG's rivals, TSM, as he was respected as one of the best and one of the smartest junglers in all of North America. He was notable as a player for a couple of different reasons, but namely, he was an incredibly good theory crafter. Minecrafter. Many of League's players at the time were a little bit too quick to judge champions in-game. If they ever saw a character do well in their personal matches, they would say that champion was overpowered, but if they saw someone do horribly with them, they would say the champ was garbage. Saint was interesting in that he wasn't so results-oriented, but rather he would actually look up the statistics of each character's damage and mana cost of every ability at each individual level and form opinions based on theoretic jungle clear times and DPS. This led to him advocating for a number of characters who nobody else believed in. He would famously talk about the potential of newer champions like Shyvana, who was a jungler that nobody thought would ever see competitive play due to her lack of crowd control, but who Saint would constantly talk about how much potential she had due to her quick jungle clear time. Lots of people took the opportunity to make some pretty funny jokes about how much he liked her and how sad Shyvana must have been when he eventually stopped playing the champion. Maybe the more interesting part about Saintvicious, though, was he was a veteran who had previously served in the US Navy. This meant that Saint spent a considerable amount of time in a world that had very clear and defined power structures. There were recruits who reported to officers, who reported to lieutenants, who reported to admirals. When someone told you to do something, you would just do it, whether you agreed or not, because they were your superior. That's kind of how the military works. This, of course, could make League of Legends a pretty frustrating experience for Saint, considering League has no power structures. Everyone just kind of shouts at each other, telling their team what to do all the time. That may sound like the typical solo queue game, but it was even true for pro teams as well. Very few organizations in the West had designated shot callers. When players were in-game, they would just kind of say what they all thought the team should do, and if someone disagreed with a particular call one player made, they wouldn't shut up and follow it. No, I mean, they would try and convince the team they should do something else. This caused an innumerable number of fights on pro teams throughout Season 1, and I think you can see where we're going with this. When Saintvicious joined CLG, he was now teammates with Hotshot, who these were possibly the two biggest League of Legends personalities that were now on the same roster. CLG, of course, didn't have any kind of designated shot caller like most teams of the era, and seeing as these pros were all very opinionated and very confident in their opinions being the right ones, this led to Hotshot and Saint fighting a lot. Sometimes it might be a passive-aggressive jab on stream, other times it might be a little post on Twitter, and occasionally we might get a bit of good-natured trash talk at some event.
All but good.
Yeah, Saint, you know, he's not good anymore, but he's got the old part.
Saint later reflected on his time with Hotshot in a twit-longer post, stating that at the end of the day he respected him. You know, whatever disagreements they had mostly came from the fact that they were just kids in the grand scheme of things, fumbling around in this newly exploding world of esports, and they still had plenty of great memories together. This kind of thing happened with a lot of players on a lot of teams in this era of play, and there weren't really any sort of hard feelings. After all, this is just kind of what League of Legends players do, right? That being said, I want to talk to you about one little fight they had, which might be my favorite thing that has ever happened in League ever. All that remains of this argument is a 26-second long YouTube video from a channel named Minecraft. Back in these early seasons, you didn't have the stream clipping functions that made it easy to highlight plays and share them around the internet like you do today. If you wanted to share a stream highlight with someone, you had to manually record the stream live, upload your video to YouTube, and then share the YouTube link. This was a hassle that not many people chose to do, but for those who did, they ended up preserving some of the most iconic moments in League's early seasons, and Minecraft was one of these channels.
What is the team you're the most afraid of right now?
Ourselves messing up.
The clip we're talking about here is simply titled HotshotGG, which you'll see why in a moment. The argument in question came when Hotshot was live streaming one of CLG's scrimmages as they were practicing against TSM. Now, we don't know exactly what it was that happened, but at some point during this game, something went wrong. It appears as though one of CLG's players made a call to engage, a call to do dragon, some sort of call that ended up going poorly. Hotshot believed that it was the right call, and whatever caused it to turn sour wasn't a problem with the initial decision itself, but Saint, on the other hand, believed the call was horrible. They fought about it for a bit, but eventually dropped it and moved on. A little later on in the game is where our clip begins. Welcome to a moment in history.
Well, that wasn't me dropping it. That was Chaucer saying it because it was the right call. It was the right call. I dropped it. I dropped it. I dropped it. Exactly. I dropped it. I dropped it. I dropped it. No, I didn't. I dropped it. I fucking dropped it. You're a fucking idiot. I dropped it. I don't give a shit if you leave right now. I honestly don't give a shit because I dropped it. That's the thing. I dropped it.
There is so much beauty in what is going on here. Firstly, we have CLG basically running it down mid and top lane. TSM, their opponents, must be thinking what the hell is going on. They probably think that they're playing so well they're causing their rivals here to implode and get tilted, but no, I mean this is just League players doing what they do, raging over the game. Hotshot is getting so frustrated you may notice he's a little zoomed in on his character. This is what happens when you hit the scroll wheel in League of Legends. You will zoom in on your champion, which is what Hotshot's doing on accident, putting himself at a disadvantage since he can't see the edges of his view that he's normally able to, and he's not getting the information he possibly could, but he's so frustrated he doesn't really seem to notice it. What's maybe even more interesting is the argument at hand, as Hotshot is emphatic that he dropped it, but of course every time he says that he dropped it, he is simultaneously picking it back up and then dropping it again with each comment. The argument is in a state of both being picked up and dropped at the same time. It's Schrodinger's League of Legends rage, but above all, we have the immaculate moment where teammates in an organized practice set are telling each other that they are bleeping idiots and they don't give a bleep if the other player rage quits in the middle of their set. This is just beautiful. Nothing in my mind so accurately represents what League of Legends is all about. This is what the game is. Not even the best players in the world can stop themselves from succumbing to the emotion that League brings out in us all. No matter who you are, League of Legends will get to you. In recent years, it's been revealed that a number of notable celebrities from the real world play League of Legends. I mean, we're talking Congress people, big name musicians, and NBA stars. All of them enjoy a bit of solo queue in their free time, and I guarantee you all of them are flamers who have called their teammates degenerates. I'm sure you're wondering what the outcome of this fight was, though, right? I mean, what exactly happened after Hotshot and Saint went at it with each other? Well, we don't exactly know what happened with the scrim itself, but I think it's safe to say that CLG probably lost this game to TSM. However, the team would still stay together for a while. Saint eventually left CLG to join Team Curse, but it wasn't because of this, at least not directly. He stayed with the team for another half year, and at the very next event they played in, CLG took first place. They swept TSM 2-0, and then swept Curse in the grand finals. So, what did we learn here? Flame your teammates. Thank you very much for watching my video, everybody. I appreciate you sticking with it until the very end. Today's video was a little bit goofy, but I hope you thought it was as fun and entertaining as I did. If you would like to see maybe a little bit more serious content, you can of course check out our Freak of Freaks documentary that came out about a week ago, which is a feature-length documentary I flew over to Korea to make. If you enjoy content like this, please feel free to subscribe if you aren't already. We got another big documentary coming out next week. And of course, if you want to go the extra mile, please consider pledging to our Patreon page. I got some cool rewards over there for you if you are interested in that sort of thing. But anyway, thank you very much for watching today's video. I will see you all next time, but until then, good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.